In tragic news, actress Hayden Panettiere died yesterday at 36. A talent who'd been in Hollywood since she was a girl, she spent her final years hinting at the dark side of the business. And in her last interviews, she kept circling one night, a yacht. She was 18. There's been mystery around that night for years, but there won't be any more because I was there. I know exactly what happened. Everyone thinks it was a story about youth and beauty being used. It wasn't. What I saw in that stateroom was something demonic. No one knows what happened behind that door. Everyone thinks they do. They're wrong. Viewer discretion is advised. This is what she wanted to say, and I'm going to be blunt about it. I've told this to 4 people in 20 years. 3 of them thought I'd been drinking. I'll only ask you to hold on to one detail. It's the part nobody believes, and it's the only part I'm certain of. The deadbolt was on the inside. I'm a marine plumber. Same job as regular plumbing, except everything's corroding and the whole system is moving while you work on it. Summer of 2006, I got put on a yacht. Everybody says big, so let me be specific. The crew used different stairwells than the guests, so the guests wouldn't have to see us. The job was the freshwater system, pressure dropping on the upper decks, and a smell in the lines. Water systems smell. Sulfur, old copper, the swampy note off a tank gone too long. You read a system by its smell the way a mechanic reads an engine by sound. This was none of those. Underneath it was sweet, fruit sweet, gone over 4 days too long in a warm room. On top of that, ozone. That clean, empty smell after lightning, rotting fruit and lightning out of a freshwater tap. I chlorinated the tank, pulled a section of line. Everything came back clean. The smell stayed exactly where it was. I was hired to find that smell. Remember that I never did. The owner didn't want a failure a day offshore with that guest list aboard, so I wrote along. Stay below, stay out of sight, be reachable, cash at the end of the night, and an NDA I signed without reading. Understand my position. Nobody up there looked at me, not rudely. Their eyes just came up to about my collar and found something else. I could stand 3 feet from a conversation and be less present than the furniture. That's how I saw what I saw. It never occurred to anyone on that boat that I was a person who could see. I met Hayden Panettiere before the party. She was 18. I say that now because otherwise you'll picture someone older. Everybody does. She was at the top of the service stair, barefoot, shoes in her lap, and she was lit up. Thrilled to be there with no cool on it at all. The way you're allowed to be at 18 before you learn you're supposed to pretend you're not impressed. And she talked to me. Nobody up there talked to us. She asked what the gauge in my hand was for. I told her. She asked a follow-up, an actual one, like she'd heard the answer. Then she asked me my name. I told her. She told me hers. Said it was nice to meet me and meant it, and went back to putting her shoes on. 40 seconds. I've thought about those 40 seconds more than most years of my life because walking off down that corridor, I remember thinking exactly, she's the only real person on this boat. The singer I noticed for a different reason. He was at the port rail after sunset, alone. The deck lights were mounted high and thrown down, so everyone at that rail had a long shadow behind them. One light, one body, one shadow. His was too long and too thin, narrow through where the shoulders should have been, wrong in a way I couldn't fix by squinting at it. And when he moved, it moved late, half a second. He'd shift his weight and it would hold, then catch up, like it wasn't being cast, like it was following. I watched it happen 5 times. Then told myself what you tell yourself. Bad angle, long day. I hadn't had a drink. I remember that specifically because in the years since I've wished I could tell people I had, it'd give them somewhere to put it. Here's the one I've never explained away. Late. The party fully going. You feel the low end through the deck plates in your boots. 200 people, all of them above me. I was on the guest deck, service side, chasing that pressure line. The corridor was empty. Nobody had a reason to be down there. I walked past a stateroom door and straight into cold. Not a draft. I've spent my life around ductwork. A draft moves. A draft comes from somewhere. This stood still. It had edges. I stepped back, out of it, forward, in it, back, forward. Like a walk-in cooler with no walls. And standing in it, I got the feeling. Everybody knows this one and nobody can defend it. Walking into your own dark house when something's off. That certainty, underneath the thinking part. There is someone in this room. The door was shut. No light under it. Every human being on that vessel was upstairs holding a drink. I put the back of my hand near the door. The cold was coming through it, so I thought in systems. Return vent dumping into dead space. Chilled water line sweating behind the bulkhead. That's a work order. That's Tuesday. I wrote it on my sheet. Cold spot, starboard stateroom passage. Check ducting AM, and I moved on. That explanation held for about 9 hours. Somewhere past 2, the party started coming apart. You can hear that from below decks. The bass drops out first. Then the voices thin. Then you get that specific sound of a lot of people deciding at the same time that they're tired. Footsteps overhead going one direction instead of every direction. I was still working. I was down on the guest level in a service alcove tracing that pressure line because I hadn't found the fault yet and I wasn't going to sleep until I had. Then I heard them coming down the corridor. 2 sets of footsteps, one of them barefoot. The woman with her had been with her all night. I'd noticed her earlier the way you notice staff. She was the one at Hayden's shoulder through every introduction, hand at her back, steering. Older, 40 maybe, the kind of put together that takes money and time. And she was kind to that girl. I want to be careful here because I've had 20 years to decide whether she was acting, and I've landed on no, she wasn't. She had Hayden's shoes hooked on 2 fingers, carrying them because the girl's feet hurt. She was laughing at something Hayden had just said, not the polite version, the real one, head back. Halfway down the corridor, she stopped and fixed the girl's hair, both hands. Took her time over it, the way you do it for your own daughter. Thumbed the strap of her dress back up onto her shoulder, told her she looked perfect. And Hayden leaned into it. Of course she did. It was the only warmth anybody had shown her all night. And she was 18, and she'd spent 6 hours being looked at by people whose eyes went right through her. That's the part I can't put down. It wasn't a mask. It never slipped. Not at the door, not after, not once. Whatever that woman was walking her toward, she didn't experience it as a bad thing. That's why the girl went through that door smiling. Then I looked at the door. I'd been in and out of every guest stateroom on that vessel doing fixture checks. I knew those doors. Privacy latch, thumb turn, the kind of thing you could pop with a flathead in about 4 seconds, because that's what you want on a boat. If somebody goes down in there, crew has to get in. This one had a deadbolt, mounted on the inside face, thrown by hand. That is not a guest lock. That is the opposite of a guest lock. You don't put a bolt like that on a door to keep people out of a room. The corridor side is where you do that. You put it there to keep something in. I've led with that detail every time I've told this. And every time, it's where I lose people. It sounds like a small thing to fixate on. It isn't. It's the only piece of physical evidence I have. And it's in my head instead of in my hand. And then my body caught up with the rest of me. That was the room, starboard side, guest deck. The door I'd written on my sheet 3 hours earlier, cold spot. Check ducting AM. That was the room I'd stood outside of and been certain, the way an animal is certain, that somebody was in there. So I did the biggest thing I did that whole night. I stepped out of the alcove, into the corridor, into the light, where I could be seen. A contractor in a wet shirt with a pipe wrench in his hand, standing in front of 2 guests at 2 in the morning. I got as far as putting a hand up. The woman looked at me, not angry, worse than angry. Everything she had for that girl, all of it, the laugh, the hands in her hair, none of it was available for me. She registered me, sorted me, and set me down under a second. The way you look at a fixture to confirm it's a fixture. And what came out of my mouth was, there's a cold spot in that room. I can look at the ducting. True. Useless. It was the only language I had. I've spent 20 years hearing myself say it. She said something pleasant back. I don't remember the words. They weren't from me. And she didn't slow down. And Hayden turned and smiled at me as she went past. Because I'd spoken to her. Because nobody spoke to her. She was still lit up. The door shut. I stood there a second in a corridor that was cold and getting colder. Then I went back to my pipes. That's the sentence. That's the whole thing. I went back to my pipes. The next item on my sheet was an access panel. The plumbing run behind the starboard staterooms, the one I'd been chasing that pressure drop toward all night. I want to be clear that I didn't decide to be there. The job put me there. The access panel is a steel plate about the size of a hardcover book, down at knee height. Behind it runs the supply for the starboard staterooms. You unclip it, you get down on your side, and you put your arm in up to the shoulder. That's where I was. On the deck, on my side, arm inside the wall. Head about 8 inches from the back of her room. The corridor lights down there run red at night so they don't spoil anybody's view topside. Hold that. Red light, steel deck, and me lying in it with my face near the wall. I heard him before I heard her. It came through the bulkhead flat and low, and I only caught 4 words. This one's still full. Not said to her. There was nothing in it, no want, no cruelty. It was the voice you use reading a label off a jar to see if it's worth keeping. Then Hayden, small, confused. Not frightened yet. The voice you make when somebody says something that doesn't parse, and you're still assuming the fault is yours. Then a sound I've never been able to name. Not crying, not a scream. Closest I've gotten in 20 years. It was the sound of air being pulled out of a room. A door opening somewhere far off in a building, and everything shifting to fill it. Then the boat stopped moving, not the engines. We'd been at anchor for hours. I mean the motion. A hull is never still. There's a tick and a slop in the lines. Water finding its level. 1,000 small noises you stop hearing, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat. And you notice it the same way. Only when it quits. It quit. All of it. Every sound that vessel had made since I came aboard, gone at once. Like a hand laid flat on a drum head. The water in the pipe went dead in my hand. And the brass fitting I was holding, up inside that wall went cold. Not cool. Cold the way a freezer rail is cold when you grab it wrong. That bite that reads as heat for half a second before your hand catches up. I let go, and my palm stayed white after. I had my arm inside the wall of that room, and the wall was pulling the warmth out of me. Then I heard the deadbolt throw from the inside. I should have gone. I've had 20 years to explain why I didn't, and the honest answer is that I couldn't, not wouldn't. My legs did not belong to me. There's a gap where the panel frame doesn't seat true, a finger's width of light. From flat on my side, it lined up. And it didn't give me the bed. It gave me the mirror on the far bulkhead. So everything I saw that night, I saw backwards in a piece of glass from across the room. And the mirror was late, half a second. The same half second I'd watched follow that man around the deck at sunset. The room would move, and then the glass would move. Think about what that does to a person. Half a second every time I knew what was coming and watched it come anyway. Made to read the next line before it's spoken, over and over. And I couldn't close my eyes, and I couldn't stop knowing first. Then the reflection looked at the panel. Before anything in the room turned, the glass turned first. Something in there put its attention on the gap I was lying behind, and then the room caught up, and there was nothing in it doing that at all. I'm not going to tell you what came after, because I can't. I've tried on paper, and I've tried out loud, and every word I reach for is smaller than the thing was. Closest I have ever gotten is this. It was like watching a light get swallowed, and the sound it made, the sound I still get some nights in the 2 o'clock part of the night, 20 years on, was a wet rope being pulled through a pipe, slow, one long drag, and then nothing. The boat started making its noises again. The water moved in the line under my hand like it had never stopped. The boat turned back. The door opened. He walked out and away, and never once looked down the service side. Then she came out, same body, same dress, same face. And I want to be exact, because people always ask if she looked hurt. She didn't. Not a mark, not a hair out of place, but the light was gone out of her, all of it. That girl who'd been so lit up, she was almost hard to look at. 6 hours earlier, sitting on a stair with her shoes in her lap, gone. Like a switch under a counter somewhere had been thrown. She walked past the alcove where I was still lying on the deck, and she didn't see me. I don't mean she ignored me. I mean there was nothing behind her eyes doing the work of seeing. I'm the only person alive who watched that girl go into that room and saw what came out of it. And I'm the only one who knows the bolt was thrown from the inside. By the time I came up, it was getting light. Deck empty, glasses everywhere. The whole boat asleep except the two of us. She was walking toward the rail, and I thought she was going over, and some part of me, way down where you don't look, thought that would be a mercy. She got 4 feet from it and stopped, mid-step, foot down wrong, the way you stop when you walk into something in the dark. There was nothing there. Open deck, open air. Then she tried again. Her hand went out and the fingers wouldn't close. I watched them open, not knocked open, not pulled. They came apart the way your hand comes apart when the message doesn't reach it, and her arm stayed out there holding nothing. Then she looked down at her own hand. I've seen a lot of things I'd rather not have seen, and that's the one. A girl looking at the end of her own arm like it had been swapped for somebody else's while she wasn't watching. And then she stopped trying. That's the part, not the stateroom. This. No struggle, no panic, not a sound. She stood there a moment, and I watched her understand it, then turned and walked back inside like she'd been told to. Calm, unhurried. The way you'd walk if you'd only come out for air. She found me 20 minutes later, barefoot, still in that dress, down the crew stair at 6 in the morning. She said, "Can you help me hide somewhere?" I said, "What?" And she said, "I just need some time to myself." Normal voice, polite. The voice you'd use asking a hotel clerk for a later checkout. There was nothing wrong with how she said it. I didn't ask her a single question. I already knew. And I didn't want it confirmed. So I did the one thing I'm good at, which is knowing where things are on a boat. Crew head on the service level, forward of the laundry. No guest had ever set foot in it. I walked her to the stair and pointed. Told her nobody goes down there till turnaround, and that the latch sticks and she'd have to pull it. She said thanks and went down. 20 years I've turned this over. That was my great act. The one time I got off the wall and helped, I pointed a girl at a bathroom. I went back an hour later, told myself it was to check a line. You already know what I found. 10 feet from that door, I walked into cold, standing still, edges on it. Same as the stateroom passage at midnight. It had gone with her. She'd asked me for time to herself, and I stood outside a steel door and understood there was no such thing available to her. Not on that boat, not ever again. I didn't knock. I listened, heard nothing at all, and went back to work. We tied up mid-morning. People always get this part wrong. They think she couldn't get off. She could. She walked down that passerelle in the sun with everybody else, and nothing stopped her. Whatever wouldn't let her over that rail had no problem with her going ashore. It only wanted her to leave the right way. She came up while they were unloading, hair done, shoes on. If you hadn't seen her the night before, you'd have seen a girl getting off a boat after a party. She found me by the gangway and stopped, and she thanked me for the bathroom, small, ordinary, completely sincere, and she used my name. She'd asked me for it 14 hours earlier, and she still had it. That's what breaks me. She was in there. Whatever else was in there with her, she was in there. And the only thing I ever gave her was a room with a latch she had to pull. Then she smiled at me. Same smile from the stair, the barefoot one. Exactly the same. Half a second late. Then she walked up the dock, and I never saw her again. I never said anything. What was I going to say? And to who? It was 2007 flip phone. No signal offshore, no camera in my pocket. The owner's man handed me my envelope without looking at me, and I took it. That's on the record too. The cost only ever came as one thing. The smell, ozone and overripe fruit, the thing I was hired to find and never found, and it came home with me. My apartment, then my truck, then an aisle at the grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon where I stood with my hand on the cart and couldn't move. 20 years, and it still finds me a few times a year. Nobody I can turn to and say, "Do you smell that?" Because nobody ever does. If the bolt was on the inside, nobody locked that girl in from the corridor. Nobody had to. Whatever kept her in that room was in there with her, and it was in there hours before she was in the cold I stood in and wrote up as a ducting problem. Check ducting AM, I've still got the sheet. Her name wasn't on the manifest. Not the guest list, not the crew list, not the customs paperwork. On paper, there was no such girl on that boat. I've looked for 20 years and never found one line of anything. On the bad nights, I'm not sure she was ever there at all, except she asked me my name at the start of it, and she used it at the end. So that's what I've got. Flat black water and a bolt on the wrong side of a door. If this one stayed with you, that's the point. Some things only ever had one witness, and one witness isn't enough. Like it so it reaches somebody else. Tell me in the comments what you'd have done in that corridor. I've never landed on an answer. Subscribe. I've got more of these to come.